I'm carrying your love with me from Idaho to Tennessee. I'll be moving with the good Lord's speed. Carrying your love with me, it's my strength for holding on. Every minute that I have to be gone, I'll have everything I'll ever need. Carrying your love with me. Truth, logic, common sense, that gut feeling, and yes, even a little psychoanalysis as we are once again together, you and I, to discuss Chad and Lori Daybell. And I think we used to be, not discuss, it was another word, but I guess I've just gotten to the point now where, anything goes, right? Y'all, I'm home in Tennessee. I went to Idaho. Y'all went with me. Then we left Idaho. I got home and I carried your love with me, each and every one of the rays on here. Thank y'all so much for the supportive words, the encouragement, the information, the perspective. Each and every one of you that helped old KJ out through this whole week in Idaho, I want to personally thank you all. Thank y'all, really. And today's pre-record is called, Unpacking After Idaho. And for many of y'all that travel around from time to time, it's a lot of fun to travel. It really is. You get all your stuff together, you go, and when you come home, you got to unpack all your bags. You got dirty laundry. Some of y'all do your laundry while you're on vacation. Hell no, says KJ on my week vacation. Nope, not going to do it. We had laundry facilities there and everything where we stayed. I just stuck all that stuff in a garbage bag and shoved it in the dang luggage, knowing when I got home I would have to unpack it and wash it up and take all the rest of the clothes that were clean and put them away, get everything that we brought back from Idaho taken and put wherever it's going to be. And so unpacking is not a fun thing to do once you've traveled, in my opinion. So unpacking after Idaho is something that, I did give y'all my impressions, what I had learned. I'm not going to beat a dead horse about any of that. You can go back to the other videos where we went to different points of interest. And maybe, maybe the first time you had some perspective and you put it in the comments, or maybe you didn't. But maybe if you do, listen to it again, or at least watch the apartment complex, things of that sort, or Chad's property or whatever. It's not his anymore, by the way. Or things of that sort, or just, any of that. Maybe you can watch it again and something will dawn on you. I hope that you will continue to help me get justice through understanding. So I'm not going to go into all that again, but I will go into things that I left out and things that need to be unpacked once the trip is over. Now listen, folks, I'm just going to go into this. When I went on the community wall, I said I interviewed a nice lady named Lori who had 14 biological children. I failed to mention, y'all, that she had 14 cesarean sections. Can you believe that? And she was explaining to me, she said, well, in the Guinness Book of World Records, 12 is the record holder. And I said, well, why not give them a call? And she just seemed too humble and private to want to do that. She didn't want to toot her own horn, but she was a very, very loving mother. And I hope y'all got something out of that video. It wasn't so much that we were going to learn any new information per se, but when you think about a Lori who is a mother in Idaho, and you apply that to Lori Cox Daybell, you see that there is a dichotomy. You see there is a difference. And, I think one thing that was left out that I tried to bring out, but I kind of want to put in there now, is that this Lori that I interviewed, she had to sacrifice a lot to raise her children, and yet she made a way. She always put her children first. And in the case of Lori Cox, she just absolutely, she had 2 children, and yes, one of them had special needs, but she knew that when she got into it. And besides that, y'all, she could have, and she had in the past, she had gotten help from sitters, and basically after she murdered Tylee, she didn't have Tylee to use anymore, if you know what I mean. But anyway, so that's what I wanted to get out of that interview with Lori from Idaho, a mother. I hope y'all could see through the forest through the trees on that. And, and it kind of opened me up to think about, this whole concept of Lori Cox and the children leaving Arizona and going into Rexburg. It didn't seem, yes, she had the apartments lined out and everything, but she did enroll JJ in school merely for, to continue to get them benefits. That was really what it was all about. But this week we had received a lot of news, and I really didn't get the opportunity to unpack that. So we're going to go over a few legal documents. But first, there's an elephant in the room about my trip to Idaho. And y'all know me. And, the last 2 years I've done everything in my power to try to express my perspective on this whole concept of Lori and Chad espoused religious beliefs for the purpose of murder. It's something I cannot escape. And at the same time, I've always tried to be respectful and neutral in anything that I've ever talked about. And when it comes to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But this week, I did. And I didn't let y'all in on this because at the time I was like, well, there's really no reason to add this to any of the videos because it's not going to matter until I get home where I can digest it and really think about what it is I want to say about this fact. And that is, I myself approached several active members in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, striking up conversations, trying to see if any of them would talk to me about the Chad and Lori Daybell case. Unfortunately, that did not happen. On the flip side of that, there were several former members that absolutely sought me out. Not all of them, but I see at least 3. And then there was one that I approached that wanted to speak with me about things. And I was like, well, in my own heart and mind, I'm like, these are former members. I don't really know what's going on emotionally once they've left the church. I don't want things to be so one-sided about this issue. What's interesting about it is again, I approached active members. I got no response. And former members, whether I approached them or they approached me, they would speak to me and answer a few questions. And, the bottom line is how is this relevant to the murder indictment, of espousing religious beliefs for the purpose of murder? As many of y'all know, I'm more into personal responsibility, but if you want to go there, if you really want to go there, the bottom line is whether it's religion or not, it's common sense that no one's going to go out here and take human life other than to say maybe in instances of self-defense. But if you want to tie it into religion, you got the 10 Commandments, and there are other religions as well that state, you don't need to be killing anybody. Again, to me, we're looking at the criminality, man's law. Man's law says you can't go around killing people unless it is proven that it is self-defense. And Y'all, Arizona would never have indicted Lori for conspiracy to commit murder on Charles Vallow if they even had any kind of evidence that this was self-defense from Alex Cox and Lori. The bottom line is this was a straight out murder of Charles Vallow. No one's going to tell me otherwise. So, my mind really, I've really been thinking about all of this. And, when I approached these members, I had some questions in mind. And although I didn't get them answered, I could have came on here and said, hey, I've got some questions. If any of y'all are LDS, would y'all please put them in the comments? But folks, really, ultimately, KJ would rather be face to face with someone who's willing to come out and talk about these things. I don't know. I'd like to believe that everyone who says I am an active member of this church, I don't know that. I want to believe that, and I respect that. But again, I can't just rely on the comments to say, oh, they've told me something as active members, so I can just take it to the bank. No, folks, it doesn't work that way for OKJ. So I did. I had 2 interviews set up. The first one was with Lori, who had the 14 children, and then I had a second one. And she could not make it. She had some personal health issues that she was dealing with. I totally understand that. The mere fact that she would have been willing to sit down and have an interview with me, I appreciated, the sentiment. I wish her well. I hope she continues to listen to this channel. She's a bright, beautiful woman, and I believe that she knows deep down in her heart that everything's going to be fine in her life as long as she continues to seek truth. And so I wasn't able to get that interview in, but I wanted to kind of give y'all an idea of the questions I was going to ask, because I told her, I said, this isn't about doing any bashing. This isn't about trying to tie this into an organized religion. What does any of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have to do with this case? Everyone has their own views on that. Again, I am for personal responsibility. Obeying man's laws. I mean, if you can't even obey man's laws, you sure as hell ain't going to obey any religious laws, right? So I want to put this on the record. The questions were as follows, and I thought they were benign questions. Maybe it would have been more than benign to someone who's an active member. I just really don't know, but the first question was, how does one get a temple recommend? And the reason that I asked this question was multifaceted, and I would have had follow-up questions to that. Because number one, to receive a temple recommend, and I know this, I can only speak of things that I know for sure. Not all members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints gets a temple recommend. I don't know if that means they've got to stay in membership for a time before they receive it or what, but I'm talking about someone who is a member. Not all of them can go into the temple. They have to get a temple recommend from a bishop. And so the reason that this is relevant to me is, number one, in the indictment, it says endorse and espouse religious beliefs for the purpose of murder. And I believe that they warped this shit. But the bottom line is I wanted to know how this could play into Lori and her self-image of herself. Because even before she got the temple recommend from this bishop, she always was haughty. She was very vain, very prideful. I'm just curious about that, because if Lori indeed, when she was at Melanie Gibbs in that in-home meeting, October the 19th of 2018, where she, in my view, had the murderous spirit to even bring up how she wanted to murder Joseph Ryan, If Lori indeed met with a bishop, now, and I'm talking bare bones, a bishop of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in her ward, as she says, as Melanie Gibbs in-home meeting, where she's talking about it in Melanie Gibbs in-home meeting, how can a bishop be okay with someone coming in there and saying, if you don't give me a temple recommend, I might just murder somebody? Number one, either that wasn't true. Maybe she went in there, never said a word about it, but she wanted to lay it all out there in an in-home meeting differently. You know she's a damn liar anyway. But let's just, for sake of argument, she walks in the bishop's office and says, if you don't give me a temple recommend, I'm going to murder someone. And obviously, y'all, she couldn't have just went in there without giving some background. And if you think about the in-home meeting she was at Melanie Gibbs, she's talking about how her kids are being molested and how the courts are against her and all that. So you would think that she would share some of the troubles or the life troubles and problems she's having with this bishop. How could a bishop say, okay, she's just told me if I don't give her a temple recommend, she might murder someone? Could this have been because she had reached some kind of special place in this church and the bishop just his hands were kind of tied on that? You know, that shows you that I don't know much about this at all. But I just can't imagine, a bishop or a pastor in any kind of religion, someone coming in saying, I just feel like I'm going to murder somebody if you don't let me do this or that, or I've got all these problems. It would seem the logical thing would have been not to give her the temple recommend, but to offer, I'm absolutely positive that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has counseling services or services that they could refer her to get her more stable in her emotional and mental state. Folks, when they gave her the temple recommend, that just empowered her even more to think she was what she was. Let's stop a minute and just think about this. If the bishop would have said, Lori, I'd love to give you a temple recommend, but you seem like you're having a lot of emotional issues, talking about murder, talking about these life problems that you got. Before you go on into the temple, Lori, with your temple recommend, why don't we get you kind of stable, in terms of, how you're viewing life, since you're saying that you want to, you're at the point of wanting to murder somebody. But they let her in. They give her a temple recommend, which bolsters her self-image that she is like this. If she wouldn't have had a temple recommend, as some of the members do not have today, how could Chad and her gotten together and her think that she was something? You see what I'm saying? If she didn't have a temple recommend, and so that logically speaking, Chad Daybell must have had a temple recommend as well, because they went in the temple together to do this bullshit sealing thing. I'm assuming behind the people at that temple. If neither one of them had a temple recommend, how could they say that they were worthy enough to consider themselves the king and queen of the 144,000 translated being? How could Chad Daybell say, I can see beyond the veil, and I've had these NDEs, and I've left my body and all this stuff. And then you think about all the things Lori talked about with Melanie Gibb and others about how she saw people going through one wall and the other in the temple, and she could see all this stuff, and then you got Melanie Gibbs standing in there while they're putting on their temple garments, and Melanie Gibbs going, oh, I feel it, Lori, come here, Lori, what is this, Lori? All I'm saying is that the temple recommend, to me, from what I understand, is a very important thing in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I have to look you in the eye and say, how did this help Lori to get her temple recommend? When she got her temple recommend, from the day she walked into the first day into that temple, throughout it all, did it help her at all? Did it help her? it made things worse for her, obviously. You would think that, that when if this is as important as I believe that this faith believes it to be, then she would have healed up more from those feelings of wanting to murder Joseph Ryan, or that her life was out of control. And really, the question is goes back to, again, how does one get a temple recommend? Do they get one when they go into the bishop and say, I've got all these problems and I'm having these bad thoughts and everything? Is that a prerequisite to get a temple recommend? Or would someone who's, life is good and I'm doing all these things for the church and I've got stability and everything, I now ask for a temple recommend? Because I didn't know until I visited Idaho, and I guess I could have probably asked Cresha K. East, and she knows a lot about this. I wanted to hear it from someone's mouth, and I did while I was in Idaho. I just thought that at some point when you become a member, you automatically can go and ask for one. I didn't realize that someone who's had the issues and the troubles and the emotional and mental state that Lori Daybell had could get a bishop to give her that. I mean, just trying to be in the shoes of a bishop, and she's saying these things, if in fact that's true. Not every member has a temple recommend. So are the ones that do have a better or more elite status in the church? Do members of this church, do they say, oh, I know Susie over here has a temple recommend. I don't have one, but Susie has, for whatever reason. I mean, I know this probably is something maybe they're not supposed to speak of it. This goes back again to the people that were around Chad and Lori, known by name by now: Zulema, Melanie P., David Warwick, Melanie Gibb. Had they not been there to continue to listen to Chad and Lori could have not continued in their self-delusion or whatever it was. Ultimately, it was just to be together, and they wanted to just wipe out anybody that would be in their path. They helped Chad and Lori. It validated Chad and Lori. And so the temple recommend, even though I believe their fringe and crazy ass views and everything were created by Chad and Lori, the bottom line is if that temple recommend wouldn't have been there, things would have been different, don't you think? Don't you think? So that was what I was trying to bring out in the second interview that I wasn't able to get. And you know what? I would be very, very humbled if anyone in the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints would like to leave it in the comments. I won't take it for fact, just your perspective about it. And again, it's not to tie what Chad and Lori did to this religion at all. It's just trying to look in the psychology of it, little psychoanalysis of the whole situation. By now, y'all should know that I am trying my very hardest to be neutral about all this, showing respect to all religions. I'm an American girl, and I can't get away with endorsing and espousing religious beliefs for the purpose of murder. That's the only reason I bring it up. Okay, switching gears as we unpack after Idaho. There were several legal documents that were released this week, and I obviously was focused on other things being in Idaho. I knew I would have to cover it when I came back. The one that really kind of sticks out to me at first and foremost is that the state has stipulated now, this is the most recent, this was this week, has stipulated twice, okay? Remember the first stipulation, a stipulation obviously is when all parties, the defense and the state, to say, yes, we stipulate that this is going to happen, whatever it is. The first one, remember that, y'all, about the DNA? Well, there's been a second stipulation. Second stipulation for consumptive testing of forensic evidence came out this week. And so all parties involved, defense and prosecution, have decided this. And this is very interesting. The state, by and through the Office of Prosecuting Attorney from Fremont County, and the defendants Chad Guy Daybell and Lori Noreen Vallow Daybell, through their respective counsel of record, hereby stipulate, they agree. Number one, the parties agree that the hair samples recently discovered by the Idaho State Lab may be consumed by a state lab to determine if sufficient DNA is present to create a DNA profile. Now, let's stop a minute. They said recently. So the state lab has found some hairs. Could these hairs be on the duct tape? Could these hairs be anywhere where the bodies were? And, you know, some might say, well, KJ, Lori was around those kids, and all the defense has to do is say, you know, of course the mother's hair would be around the kids and all that. But what if it's stuck on the duct tape? And better yet, what if Chad Daybell's hair is on the duct tape or in the garbage bags or anywhere in those graves? You know, you'd have to ask that. I mean, how many times was Chad Daybell around those children? Not many. He wanted to get Lori off to herself so him and her could have the James and Elena crap going on. This is important, y'all. This is recent. There has been hair found. We don't know. It doesn't specify, but think about where they found this hair. The state lab has found it. They are going over evidence that has been collected at Alex's apartment, Lori's apartment, at the grave sites, on different evidence that was collected. It would seem to me that the state lab has been working on this for some time to just be recently coming out with hair found. Obviously, you know, nobody wants to talk about it, but I will. But, you know, those hairs could have been Tylee and JJ's. But more importantly, if they can get a DNA profile, and it is Chad Daybell and Lori Daybell's, you know, they're shit out of luck, especially if it's on the tape in the garbage bags. In the event sufficient DNA is available to create more than one profile, the DNA sample will be split between the parties for testing, and each party may have their expert test it on the portions of the DNA. In the event DNA is available for only one profile to be created, the parties agree that the state lab shall halt any further testing, and the parties will reconvene at the time to determine who should conduct any further testing. And finally, in the event the state lab determines that there is not sufficient DNA to create a DNA profile, the parties shall reconvene to determine what, if any, course of action to take regarding the samples. And as many of y'all know, well, maybe some of y'all know, DNA on hair, the best way to get that is through root. If the root of it, it's really hard. Also, you know, I wasn't thinking about this, but what if the state lab has got some hair of Tammy's? Well, no, it wouldn't. I would think they would test that, and they have an abundance of that. So it couldn't be Tammy's hair. In terms of looking for poisons in her hair, I'm sure that would probably be ironed out in the autopsy and the medical report on that. It would almost have to be, y'all, one of the crime scenes that would, where they found hair. Whose hair do you think it is? So that is big news to me. It's just as big as the news we got in the first stipulation about the shovel and all that. Remember that? The garbage bags, the duct tape and all of that. The fingerprint, the partial fingerprint. So that's just something to keep in mind as we continue moving forward to get justice through understanding. So I'm going to look again here, the objection to the defendant's motion to declare defendant not death eligible. And y'all, if you haven't figured it out now, Archie is doing his job. He's come out with this motion to declare defendant not death eligible, and the state's response says objection. All right, that means what they've said, what Archie has said about Lori not being death eligible, we object to that. So the defendant has asked this court to declare her not eligible for the death penalty pursuant to the 8th and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution. And the state talks about everything, the case law that Archie has put in there and all that. I'm not going to go into that. If you want to hear someone read the whole document out, go to the docket 79 with Eric Big E. He's done that. But I want to bring out some specifics here. In that, in the case before the court, and this is the state speaking in objection of Lori, them saying Lori shouldn't get the death penalty. The defendant has been indicted with premeditated murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Both of these crimes differ from felony murder in that they require, now listen up, they require the state to prove that the defendant intended for her victims to die. And the state is going to have to prove that Lori intended for Tylee and JJ and Tammy to die. Okay? That it's just surreal that the state feels that they have this evidence that they can prove that Lori intended for JJ and Tylee to die. And we all know she did. But again, this goes through the adjudication process that the state has to prove this. Contrary to the assertions of the defendant, sufficient evidence exists for the grand jury to find probable cause that the defendant intended for her children and Tammy Daybell to die. Further, there is sufficient evidence for a jury to conclude that the defendant participated in the killing of her own children. And this is really something that's kind of like a wake-up call for anyone that's looking through the legal lens of all this. There is no way that she would have had these charges in the first place had she not been indicted by a grand jury. They presented evidence to her, evidence to the indictment to these grand jury members, and they're the ones. The state didn't say this. The grand jury members said there's enough evidence here. And so the state is saying, they indicted her. We showed them evidence, and according to them, there is enough evidence to prove what? That she not only had the intent that JJ, Tylee, and Tammy die, but she actually participated, y'all. You know, this whole bullshit, her alibi that she didn't know before, after, or was the principal offender, according to the state of Idaho, and Lindsay Blake, Rob Wood, and Rachel Smith, they have enough evidence that shows she actually participated in it. You know, that's something we didn't want to wrap our heads around, that any mother could do this. But then again, just as we spoke before, what if they find Lori's hair on the duct tape or her partial fingerprint on the duct tape? That woman would do anything to get out of her cowardly, evil, diabolical act. She can kiss my country ass. I hope they damn send her to the worst prison in Idaho, either on death row or life. Further, there is sufficient evidence for a jury to conclude that the defendant participated in the killing of her own children. I re-emphasize that. This intent of the defendant differentiates her from defendants, and then they state the case that Archie's saying. This is different, says the state, from what Archie says is similar to a case that he's letting judge know and all that. It is fundamental that causing harm intentionally must be punished more severely than causing the same harm unintentionally. And what that means is did Lori say she didn't know before or after, or she didn't participate in it? And Archie's saying that she didn't intentionally mean for them to be harmed. What the hell? What the hell? What did she think? Were they, we don't know. Maybe we'll find out. Maybe she gave them some Jim Jones Kool-Aid and thought they just slipped away, and she didn't really, there was nothing harmful about, making my kids go to sleep and never wake up because I poisoned them. I just wanted to get the zombie out of them. Give me a break, y'all. The way that these two children were done, even if you want to believe that she gave them the Jim Jones Kool-Aid and they fell asleep and then they had to put them somewhere, it's still absolutely egregious, an affront to humanity, which is an aggravating factor in a death penalty case. Check. In conclusion, the defendant states in her motion, it is well established that the death penalty to be reserved to the most egregious murders. Oh, well, I understand Archie's got to look at this the way he does. I mean, I just cannot believe for 1 second that he can't see the forest through the trees, which is the second time I've said that. What in the world she could possibly have told him that he wants to go out there to say she didn't know before or after or was part of it, and the state is sitting here saying we've got evidence she participated and that she deserves the death penalty. She further quotes Gregg versus Georgia, stating, quote, the death penalty is reserved for crimes that are so grievous an affront to humanity that the only adequate response may be the penalty of death. Well, the state goes on to say the state concurs with these statements. And for this reason right there that they put in there is why we filed the notice of intent to seek the death penalty in the case before the court. The facts of this case are egregious and heinous. The evidence the state will introduce at trial, some of which a grand jury has already reviewed, will establish that the defendant intended for her children and her boyfriend's wife. It's interesting. Sometimes when I read these legal documents, I keep in mind the words they use, which are so important in legal documents. It's like they're letting Archie know, and whether Lori's smart enough to read the document and realize it was her boyfriend. It was her boyfriend, not her husband. That Chad Chinny Chin Chin asshole. That was her boyfriend, who she chose over her children, and who he and her both decided that innocent life of Tammy should be snuffed out. The hell with this bullshit about Viola. The hell with zombies. These were human beings that deserve to live. It's egregious and it's an affront to humanity. But they say it in there. They say her boyfriend and that her and her boyfriend wanted to kill the children and wanted Tammy to die. And she ultimately acted to make those deaths happen. Lori Cox, she acted in order to make those deaths happen. Period. End of sentence. The defendant has failed to provide any authority whatsoever which would allow the court to apply rulings regarding felony murder to conspiracy to murder or first-degree murder. As such, the state respectfully requests that the court deny the defendant's motion. The state objects, and the state is asking the court to deny. Those are words, are they not? Now, you might be saying, okay, KJ, you made your point. Well, I'm fixing to make another point about objection and denying, okay, in a court document. But the bottom line is that Archie wants to say that there is a difference between conspiracy and felony murder and the intent of it. The intent of it, like if it's just conspiracy to murder or if it's felony murder, first degree murder, there's an intent that's in the Idaho code under first degree murder and which is felony murder that has to be, shown. But then again, just as the state said earlier, we have to prove that she wanted this to happen. We have to prove that she participated and wanted this to happen. So they don't want the death penalty taken off the table for Lori. Remember a while back we talked about, Lori's not going to get the death penalty. And, and we said when they came out and said they were seeking the death penalty, capital punishment for Lori, we said, that maybe they're using this for leverage. The bottom line is that Lori did intend. Everything points to that. And then we get to the response from the state. They respond to the defendant's motion for a joint settlement and strategy session. And y'all know a few videos back, I went off the deep end about why Chad and Lori want to meet face to face. They probably want to masturbate in front of each other and hope that their attorneys will go in the other room. I'm sorry. That's how disgusting these people are. They're disgusting. Why they would let them go in the same room. And some said, well, KJ, the state is against it. Well, folks, according to legal wording in documents, in everything in the case file from Chad to Lori, the state always made it clear we object and we ask the court to deny this motion, right? You're not going to find those two words in this response by the state. It doesn't say anything in there, we object, or that we ask this court to deny this. You see, the state is leaving the door open, y'all. I guarantee you. The state of Idaho, by and through the Fremont County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, submits the following response to the defendant's motion for a joint settlement and strategy session. Okay? It doesn't say, let me give you an example. Right here. This was the objection from the state to defendant's motion to declare defendant not death eligible. You see the word objection? The state's objection? Well, you don't see that here. It doesn't say the state objects to the defendant's motion for a joint settlement strategy session. It doesn't say that. The state has serious reservations. Okay, the state is saying, well, we have these, we're kind of concerned about this. And this is pointed toward Judge Boyce, y'all. The state has serious reservations about allowing the co-defendants to have face-to-face or other communications directly with each other, while the state recognizes that the defendants may communicate through their counsel. Okay, Archie, and that's confirming to y'all. And we knew it anyway, but it's just a confirming thing, a fact, that Archie and John Pryor at any time, they can talk together. And I believe they've been talking back and forth to each other for some time. And in fact, that explains why Archie has filed some motions in the past. And we're like, why didn't John Pryor file the same kind of motion? Well, he don't have to. These are co-defendants, you see. The state has serious reservations about allowing the co-defendants to have face-to-face or other communications directly with each other, while the state recognizes that the defendants may communicate through their counsel and also may strategize together through their attorneys, which the state would not be a party to or have input on. There is no inherent right or privilege for the defendants to have direct communications, okay? So they are co-defendants, but there's nothing in the law, in the rules of evidence or anything else in Idaho that says that because they are co-defendants, that they should be able to meet together face to face. It just says that the attorneys can. The state recognizes that the defendants have agreed to not use any evidence or information they may obtain through any discussions or meetings against each other. Nevertheless, the state is not willing to make a similar agreement. Any communications between each individual defendants and his and her attorneys are confidential. However, having the other defendant and his or her counsel present would make them potential witnesses of statements made by the other defendant and eliminate any claim to attorney-client privilege. And y'all can see this shitstorm that would happen if the judge allows this. And I'm not saying he won't. And we'll get to that. What I'm saying is, if you had Archie and Lori walk into a room and John Pryor and Chad walk in the room and they all sat down, the bottom line is that what are they there for? Are they there as the Wonder Twin powers activate? Are they going to strategize and join forces that Alex did all this? If that's the case, Archie and John Pryor sitting there, holding hands about the whole damn thing? Or does John Pryor or Archie, which would really be a smart move, say, yeah, we'll meet with you. This will be off the record. The state won't know anything about it. And we can't use any of this. But folks, they don't have to come out and say, well, Archie says, well, Chad said this, and we're going to put this in the trial. He doesn't have to say it like that. He could just have the knowledge of it and go around it. And that would make him a witness. It would make John Pryor a witness. It would make Archie a witness. And they would sit there and in John Pryor's mind, as Lori and Archie sitting across from the table there, be thinking, okay, Lori and Archie's telling us how their narrative is. Lori's going to say it was Alex, and vice versa. And then they'll get a bird's eye view of that, but guess who wouldn't? That is the state. The state wouldn't. Of course, the state does get Lori's alibi, which according to law, she has to put out there. Which brings me to another thing. Why hasn't Chad come out with his notice of alibi? You see? In addition, the defendant is arguing there is a privilege pursuant to Idaho Rules of Evidence 408, 410, and 507. This is simply not the case. Idaho Rules of Evidence 408 deals with statements made during settlement or mediation negotiations, but without the state present, there can be no true settlement or mediation. So when you're talking about settlement or mediation, the state has to be in the room. Period. End of sentence. Of course, the state can go in there, they can mediate, talk about a settlement and stuff, and the state can say, we're not going to use anything y'all talk about if we decide that we can't mediate and we can't settle. But the state does need to be there. We see it, really. It's kind of laughable, but on Law and Order, when they got them by the balls, and the attorneys there and everything, they're like in a room. We know this and this and this. We need to iron all this out. Will you take this? If you don't, you're facing life. Whatever. That's what the state is saying. You can't have mediation. You can't have a settlement without the state in there. The state is the one that's going to be the negotiator. Okay, the state is going to be the one to say, we'll accept this settlement. Regarding Idaho Rules of Evidence 410, since there is no plea being entered and no attorney for the prosecution proposed to be present for that discussion, this rule is not applicable. Idaho Rules of Evidence 507 is applicable to mediations, but the rule doesn't necessarily protect statements made by co-defendants, especially to each other. So even though I said before that in terms of settlement and mediation in one rule, the state has to be there, they do say there's a narrow way in mediation. But again, this goes back to, but it doesn't say anything. The co-defendants are right there with each other. In addition, the defendant is requesting to have settlement conference separate from any mediation. And how can you, there has to be some talk in there. Mediation and settlement has to all kind of go hand in hand. And they're wanting it separate. Maybe this is John Pryor and Archie's way of trying to figure out what each other or what their strategy is. This isn't about strategy sessions for both of them to get off the hook. This is about each co-defendant wanting, if they're going to throw each other under the bus, they're going to try to figure out why the other one is saying what they're saying and vice versa. Once further concern for the state is how a meeting would be facilitated, which would protect the confidential privilege the defendant is claiming and also meet the safety concerns and guidelines, especially given the nature of the charges pending against them. And again, this is a capital death penalty case. These are serial killers, y'all, through and through. You think about that. We was up in Idaho at the Madison Women's Detention Center there. She'd have to be brought over. Chad would have to be brought over. They'd have to meet somewhere, I'm assuming, in a room somewhere in the courthouse. And the safety concerns of all that. And what does the state say about Chad and Lori getting together? Wherefore, the state respectfully requests the court consider the concerns raised by the state. It does not say in here, wherefore the state respectfully objects to this, asks the court to deny it. They just say, hey, Judge Boyce, we're telling you now about all this in this response. We want to make sure that you look at all of this and say, if you do decide to let them meet, our concern is that you look at that, and if you rule that they can stay together, there's not going to be any issues on appeal, there's not going to be any rules broken, and that you, Judge Boyce, look at the Idaho Rules of Evidence and make a determination according to the concerns, the reservations of the state. In summary, the bottom line is the state is not objecting to Chad and Lori being together. And this is why they're not. They're not asking the court to deny this motion for strategy sessions and mediation. Because, I think the state was probably thinking, if it's possible and the judge okays it and the judge says nothing's going to go wrong in this, and all of these security concerns, the protection of defendants' rights to counsel and privilege and all that are going to be okay, everything's fine, that Chad and Lori do sit in a room and let them both sit there like damn idiots and try to figure out how in the hell, with the discovery that's been turned over, what the evidence is, how in the hell can they fit it in there to make them both look innocent and Alex look guilty. And once they've gone through this fruitless, basically beating their head up against the wall shit, this damn twiddling your thumbs because you ain't got no real way of getting out of this shit, and Chad and Lori have to sit in there and they strategize and do all this, and they realize that their asses are cooked and there's no way they can spin this. Then the state maybe thinks, once they've figured out there's no way out of it, that they will come to a settlement agreement. They will come to a plea agreement. That's the reason I believe the state did not object or ask the court to deny it. Because it makes sense, y'all. Could you imagine Chad and Lori sitting across from each other in a room? They're not, and whether, and the attorneys are sitting in there, and the attorneys say, okay, all right, so we've got this evidence here that shows, Chad, that you were right there when Tylee was burned up and all this and that. And, John Pryor's like, how are we going to spin this? how are we going to do this? And Lori, at the same time, Archie's saying, and Lori, at the same time, you're going to have to figure out a way, to explain why Tylee wasn't with you anymore. Where was she, Lori? Every question and every way that Archie and John Pryor try, even if Lori and Chad didn't get together, and Archie and John Pryor wanted to get together and try to figure it out, to try to make a pathway to blame it all on Alex, it's going to really come to that conclusion for Chad and Lori and their attorneys that they're shit out of luck. They are up shit creek without a paddle. They better come to some sort of plea agreement with the state. Pure and simple. And it's just my view that once this is fleshed out for the defense attorneys, and I believe they've been in contact. Maybe they've known it all along that this needs to be played out because it's a death penalty case, but their clients are headstrong and just refuse to accept responsibility for what they've done. That maybe putting them together and them realizing whatever, maybe Chad will sit across from her and say, you know what, you and Alex did this. I didn't have nothing to do with this. And she would know in her mind, Chad's the one who got me and Alex all riled up about me being the queen and all this. And he's sitting there here in my face, looking me in the eye, says Lori, and telling me he had nothing to do with this when I know good and damn well he did. And this is a damn shame because I thought Chad Daybell loved me. And now, I realize the writing on the wall. The writing on the wall, y'all, is that Chad and Daybell will not be able to talk their way out of this, whether they meet or not. It's just as simple as that. So we've unpacked a few things, and I've got a few more things that I need to go over that are related to this case that I'm still doing a little bit of an analysis on. Leave your comments. Let me know what you think. I, again, want to thank all of y'all. I'm sure some of y'all were thinking of me, and some of y'all were praying for me that we'd have safe travels. I know we received a lot of wonderful comments to that effect, and I believe the rays helped us stay safe. Also, I haven't forgot about Mr. Wayne and his Q&A. I think it's important. Y'all have been so sweet and so wonderful about him. He's my world, and I've been meaning to do it for some time. If you haven't got a question for Mr. Wayne, that's cool. If some of y'all do have a question, go to the community wall. There's a post saying a Q&A. We were going to get that released that evening, but my data ran low and the Wi-Fi was low, and I said, well, we'll just do it when we get back. And of course, that second interview didn't happen. I want to apologize for that. But again, if it was meant to happen, it would have happened. I'm just one of those believers that things happen for a reason, So I love you all. I'm glad to be home. I'm glad to be back in the Ray Room with all of y'all. I will get back. We're going to try to get this every Wednesday and Friday. Hopefully we'll get some more news, some more legal news. And do yourself a favor. Go back and look at the week in Idaho, at some of the trips and stuff. Maybe something will jiggle and trigger, and you'll put something in the comments that maybe you didn't see before. It's always been about your comments, y'all. I know y'all might think, oh, KJ. But folks, this channel was opened up for a very special reason. This channel is not for everyone, but everyone is welcome to get justice through understanding. Whatever that means to any of y'all. I know we all love and cherish the victims and the victims' family members. And I hated that I missed Cresha's live stream last night. I'm doing a little catch-up. I sent her a text and said, I'll catch you on the next one. I've got a donation to Difficult Research to present to her, and I'll get to it. You can be sure of it. I am a woman of my word, except when shit happens and I can't get the interview that I was hoping to get. But then again, it all works itself out, doesn't it? I'm just glad to be home in Tennessee and glad to be back with y'all. I love you all. keep on looking.